What if the problem isn't that you don't have enough, but that you've never been taught how to recognize it? This story explores a question that haunts many of us. When is enough enough? Why does satisfaction always seem just beyond reach? Let the story carry you gently toward rest. There's no need to stay alert. Drift when you need to. Sophia Chun had everything she'd ever wanted, and yet she wanted more. She was 43 years old, lived in a beautiful apartment in the city, had a successful career in marketing that paid well and offered recognition, owned more clothes than she could wear, more books than she could read, more kitchen gadgets than she could use, had traveled to 37 countries, had accomplished every goal she'd set for herself 5 years ago, and still the feeling of not enough persisted, a low hum of dissatisfaction, a sense that something was missing, that if she could just achieve one more thing, acquire one more possession, experience one more adventure, then she'd finally feel satisfied, complete, enough. But the satisfaction never came. Each achievement brought a brief moment of pleasure. Then the emptiness returned. The goalposts moved. What had seemed like enough from a distance became obviously insufficient. Once attained, she thought maybe she was just ambitious, driven, always reaching for more. But it didn't feel like healthy ambition. It felt like hunger, an emptiness that couldn't be filled no matter how much she poured into it. One Saturday afternoon, walking through a neighborhood she rarely visited, Sophia noticed a small museum she'd never seen before. The sign above the door read, "The Museum of Enough." Curious, she entered. Inside, the museum was quiet and spacious. White walls, wooden floors, and exhibits that were unusual. Each display case held a single object, and beside each object, a plaque describing not the object itself, but the moment someone had recognized it as enough. A worn pair of running shoes. The plaque read, "Marcus Johnson, age 32, the moment he realized he didn't need the expensive new model, that these shoes, comfortable and familiar, were enough. A modest wedding ring. Sarah Kim, age 28, the moment she told her fiancé she didn't need a bigger diamond, that this simple band was enough to represent their love. A photograph of a small apartment. David Torres, age 51, the moment he stopped house hunting for something bigger, realized this space was enough for his actual life, not the life he imagined he should be living. Sophia moved through the museum slowly. Each exhibit showed the same pattern, someone recognizing sufficiency, choosing to stop reaching for more, declaring in some way that what they had was enough. And according to the plaques, these moments of recognition had brought profound peace to the people who experienced them. At the back of the museum, Sophia found a curator, an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that held both sadness and joy in equal measure. She was arranging a new exhibit, a simple coffee mug. "What is this place?" Sophia asked. The curator looked up and smiled. Exactly what the sign says, a museum of enough, of the moments when people stopped reaching for more and recognized what they had as sufficient. But why? Sophia gestured around. Why would anyone celebrate stopping? Isn't that just giving up? Settling? Is it? The curator asked. Or is it something else? Come, sit with me. They sat on a bench facing the exhibits. "Tell me," the curator said, "what do you want?" Sophia opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't know where to begin. A promotion, a bigger apartment, a relationship, to travel more, to accomplish more, to have more. The list was endless. "Everything," she finally said. "I want everything, and I know that sounds greedy, but I feel like I haven't achieved enough yet, like I'm not there yet, wherever there is." "And where is there?" the curator asked gently. "I don't know. That's the problem. I keep thinking I'll know when I arrive, that I'll feel it. This sense of satisfaction, of being done, of having enough, but it never comes." The curator nodded. "That's because enough isn't a destination. It's not something you arrive at by accumulating more. It's a decision, a recognition, a moment when you stop and say, 'This is sufficient, not perfect, not everything I could possibly want, but enough.' But how do you know when you've reached enough?" Sophia asked. "What if you stop too soon? What if there's more you should be reaching for?" "Ah," the curator said, "the tyranny of should, the fear of missing out, the belief that somewhere out there is the perfect amount that would make you feel complete. And if you stop before reaching it, you've failed." Somehow, she gestured to the exhibits. Every person here faced that same fear. What if this isn't enough? What if I'm settling? What if I give up too soon? But they chose to stop anyway, to declare sufficiency. And do you know what they discovered? What? That enough was always enough. That the feeling of insufficiency wasn't about the actual amount. It was about the constant reaching, the perpetual dissatisfaction, the inability to recognize what was already there. The curator offered to give Sophia a tour of the deeper collection. Exhibits not on public display, reserved for people seriously grappling with the question of enough. In a back room, the curator showed her a series of photographs, before and after images of the same people. "Before enough," the curator explained, pointing to the first set of photos, "the people looked successful, well dressed, surrounded by nice things, but their faces held a quality Sophia recognized in her own mirror: tightness, striving, a kind of hunger. After enough," the curator said, indicating the second set, "the same people, often with less, smaller homes, simpler clothes, fewer possessions, but their faces were different, open, peaceful, present. They look lighter," Sophia observed. "Yes, the weight of wanting is heavy, the constant reaching for more, the perpetual sense that what you have isn't quite sufficient. It's exhausting. When you choose enough, that weight lifts." "But don't they regret it?" Sophia asked. "Don't they wonder what they missed by stopping?" "Some do," the curator admitted, "especially at first. The culture screams at us constantly that more is better, that enough is settling, that satisfaction comes from accumulation. Going against that message is uncomfortable. But here's what most of them discover," she continued. "The things they were reaching for, they didn't actually want them. They wanted the feeling they thought those things would bring, the satisfaction, the sense of completion, the feeling of being enough. And paradoxically," the curator said, "that feeling comes not from getting more, but from wanting less, from recognizing what you have as sufficient, from allowing yourself to stop reaching." Sophia felt resistance rising in her chest. This sounded like giving up, like admitting defeat, like stopping the climb before reaching the summit. But a small voice whispered, "What if there is no summit? What if the climb never ends? What if satisfaction keeps receding no matter how high you go?" The curator showed Sophia to a small room with a comfortable chair and a journal. "If you're willing, I'd like you to try an exercise. Make a list of everything you have that's enough, not everything you have, just the things that, if you're honest, are actually sufficient for your needs." Sophia took the journal hesitantly, started writing. "My apartment is enough space for one person. I don't need bigger. My income is enough to cover needs and many wants. I don't need more. My wardrobe is enough clothing. I haven't worn half of it in a year. My kitchen has enough equipment. The gadgets I bought and never use are just clutter." The list continued, item after item, possession after possession, circumstance after circumstance. When she was honest, really honest, most of what she had was already enough. Then the curator asked her to make a second list, everything she wanted but didn't have, and beside each item, why she wanted it. A bigger apartment, because successful people have bigger places. A promotion, because I should be further along in my career by now. A relationship, because everyone says I should want partnership. More travel, because impressive people travel extensively. Designer clothes, because they signal status and success. Looking at this list, Sophia felt something shift. Almost none of her wants were actually hers. They were absorbed from culture, from comparison, from ideas about what successful people should have and do. "What do you actually want?" the curator asked. "Not what you think you should want, not what would impress others, but what you genuinely desire for your actual life." Sophia sat with the question, let herself go deeper than the surface wants, and slowly a different list emerged. More time to read for pleasure instead of productivity. Deeper friendships instead of extensive networks. Creative work instead of optimized output. Presence in moments instead of constant planning for future moments. Simplicity instead of accumulation. This list was shorter, simpler, and none of it required more. In fact, most of it required less striving, less acquiring, less doing. "This," the curator said, pointing to the second list, "is what your soul actually wants. But the culture has convinced you that you want the first list, and so you keep reaching for things that will never satisfy because they were never your actual desires to begin with." Over the following weeks, Sophia returned to the museum repeatedly. Each time the curator showed her different aspects of enough. There were exhibits about hedonic adaptation, the psychological phenomenon where we quickly adjust to new circumstances and possessions, returning to our baseline level of happiness, regardless of what we acquire. The new car that brings joy for 2 weeks then becomes just a car. The promotion that feels amazing for a month then becomes the new normal with new pressures. The apartment upgrade that delights briefly then fades into background while new desires emerge. The satisfaction you're seeking, the curator explained, doesn't come from acquiring, it comes from appreciating, from being present with what you already have rather than constantly looking ahead to what's next. There were exhibits about comparison, how the feeling of not enough often came not from actual insufficiency, but from comparing yourself to others. And since there was always someone with more, comparison created infinite dissatisfaction. You're not competing with yourself or your actual needs, the curator said. You're competing with an imaginary standard created by looking at everyone else's highlight reel while living your own behind the scenes. Reality, there were exhibits about the paradox of choice. How beyond a certain point, more options created more anxiety rather than more satisfaction. The restaurant with 300 items on the menu creating more stress than pleasure. The closet so full of clothes that getting dressed became paralyzing. Enough, the curator explained, often means choosing limitation, narrowing options, creating boundaries. Counterintuitively, constraint often brings more satisfaction than abundance. One afternoon, the curator asked Sophia to participate in an experiment. For 1 month, I want you to practice enough, not as a permanent commitment, just an experiment. 30 days of choosing sufficiency instead of seeking more. The rules were simple. Buying nothing non-essential. When wanting something, wait 1 week before acquiring it. Usually the wanting would pass. Each day identify 3 things that are enough, actually sufficient for their purpose. Practice gratitude for what's already present instead of yearning for what's absent. When the voice of not enough arose, notice it without acting on it. Sophia agreed, though part of her felt anxious about even temporary stopping. The first week was uncomfortable. She felt deprived, restricted, like she was artificially limiting herself. Every advertisement seemed to mock her with things she couldn't have. Every social media post seemed to highlight what she was missing. But the curator had prepared her for this. The discomfort isn't because you actually need those things. It's because you're withdrawing from an addiction. The addiction to acquiring, to wanting, to seeking satisfaction in the next purchase. The second week, something shifted. The constant low-level wanting that had been humming in the background of her consciousness began to quiet. Without the option to acquire, she started actually using what she had. Reading books she owned but had never opened. Wearing clothes she'd bought and forgotten. Cooking with equipment that had gathered dust. And she discovered it was enough. She didn't need more books. She needed to read the ones she had. She didn't need more clothes. She needed to appreciate the ones she owned. The third week brought clarity. She realized how much energy had been going into wanting, browsing, shopping, comparing, researching, planning purchases. All that energy could be redirected toward creating, connecting, being present, actually living instead of constantly preparing to live once she had enough. By the fourth week, Sophia felt different, lighter, less driven by hunger, more content with what was. The apartment that had seemed too small now felt cozy. The wardrobe that had seemed insufficient now felt abundant. The life that had seemed lacking now felt enough. Not perfect, not everything she could imagine wanting, but sufficient, adequate, enough. At the end of the month, Sophia met with the curator to discuss her experience. "How do you feel?" the curator asked. "Strange," Sophia admitted. "I feel satisfied, but I also feel like I'm not supposed to feel satisfied. Like satisfaction means I've stopped growing or striving or reaching for my potential." "Ah, yes," the curator nodded. "The belief that satisfaction equals complacency, that if you're content, you must be lazy or unmotivated. Our culture is very invested in keeping you dissatisfied. Dissatisfaction drives consumption, drives productivity, drives the endless reaching that benefits everyone except you. But is it true? Sophia asked. Does choosing enough mean giving up on growth? Not at all, the curator said. You can grow and create and develop while also recognizing that what you have right now is enough. They're not mutually exclusive. You can appreciate sufficiency in this moment while also evolving. The difference is you're growing from a place of enough rather than from a place of not enough, from fullness rather than emptiness, from choice rather than desperation. She paused, then continued. The question isn't whether you should want things or have goals. The question is, are you happy now with what you have, or is happiness always deferred, always dependent on the next achievement, the next acquisition, the next milestone? Because if it's always deferred, the curator said gently, you never actually arrive. You spend your entire life in the gap between where you are and where you think you should be, always reaching, never resting, never satisfied. Sophia felt tears coming because it was true. She'd spent decades in that gap, always striving, never arriving, constantly postponing satisfaction until she achieved just a little bit more. What if I choose enough and then discover I was wrong? Sophia asked. What if I settle for what I have and later realize it wasn't actually sufficient? Then you adjust, the curator said simply. Enough isn't a prison sentence. It's not a permanent vow of poverty or limitation. It's a practice, a daily choosing to recognize sufficiency instead of constantly seeking more. If your circumstances change and what was enough no longer is, you respond. You're not locked in. But most people discover, she added, that what changes isn't the circumstance, it's the constant wanting, and when the wanting quiets, what remains is enough, usually more than enough. Sophia continued practicing enough, not perfectly, not always. Some days the old hunger returned, the sense that something was missing, the belief that more would bring satisfaction. But she'd learned to recognize that feeling for what it was, not a signal of genuine need, but a trained response, a habit of wanting that had been cultivated by years of messages telling her she was insufficient as she was. When the wanting arose, she'd pause, ask herself, is this a genuine need or a manufactured desire? Do I actually want this, or do I want the feeling I think this will bring? Will acquiring this actually bring satisfaction, or just temporary relief before the next wanting emerges? Most of the time, the honest answers were manufactured desire, wanting a feeling, temporary relief. So she'd let the wanting pass without acting on it, like a wave, arising, cresting, subsiding, without needing to be fulfilled. And in the space where constant wanting had been, other things emerged. Creativity. When she wasn't constantly consuming, she started creating, writing, drawing, making things with her hands. Connection. When she wasn't constantly shopping or browsing or researching purchases, she had time for actual conversations, actual presence with friends, appreciation. When she stopped focusing on what she didn't have, she started noticing what she did have. The morning light through her window, the comfort of her favorite chair, the taste of her coffee, simple pleasures that had been invisible while she was focused elsewhere. joy, not the brief spike of acquisition, but the steady warmth of sufficiency, of having enough, of being enough, of the constant striving finally relaxing. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't impressive by cultural standards, but it was peaceful, solid, real. She'd spent decades believing that satisfaction was just beyond reach, that one more achievement, one more possession, one more experience would finally bring the feeling of enough. But enough had been here all along, not in what she had, but in recognizing what she had as sufficient, in choosing to stop reaching, in allowing herself to rest in sufficiency instead of constantly seeking more. 1 year after her first visit to the museum, Sophia returned. She brought something to donate, a small object. For the collection, it was a journal, the one where she'd made her lists. Everything that was enough, everything she thought she wanted, everything she actually wanted. "I'd like to contribute this," she told the curator, "as my moment of enough the day I realized that what I had was already sufficient, that the problem wasn't insufficient resources. It was insufficient appreciation." The curator accepted the journal with a warm smile. "This will help others who are where you were, searching for enough in accumulation instead of recognition." "How many people visit the museum?" Sophia asked. "Not many," the curator admitted. "Most people aren't ready. They're still convinced that more is the answer. That satisfaction is just one more purchase away. They have to exhaust that path before they're ready to consider sufficiency. But those who do come," she continued, "often experience profound relief. The permission to stop, to rest, to recognize what they have as enough. That permission is rare in our culture. Everything tells you to want more, to reach higher, to never be satisfied. This museum offers a different message." Sophia looked around at the exhibits, each one a moment of someone choosing enough, recognizing sufficiency, stopping the endless reach for more. "It's radical," she said. "In this culture, choosing enough is an act of rebellion." "Yes," the curator agreed. "Quiet rebellion. Not loud or dramatic, but profound. Because if everyone recognized sufficiency, the whole engine of consumer culture would collapse. Your contentment is a threat to systems that profit from your dissatisfaction." They sat together in comfortable silence. Then Sophia asked the question she'd been wondering about for months. "Are you ever tempted to want more? To feel like what you have isn't enough?" The curator smiled. "Every day, the conditioning is deep. The messages are constant. But I've practiced long, enough that I can usually recognize the wanting for what it is. Not a genuine need, just a familiar pattern. And I let it pass." "Does it get easier?" Sophia asked. "Yes and no," the curator said. "The wanting arises less frequently, less urgently, but it never disappears completely. Enough is a practice, not a destination. You choose it daily, sometimes moment by moment, but it does get easier to choose. The peace of sufficiency becomes more attractive than the hunger of constant wanting." Sophia left the museum and walked home through the city, the same route she'd walked a year ago when she'd first stumbled upon the museum. But she walked it differently now, more slowly, more present, actually noticing the walk instead of just enduring it as transportation between destinations. She passed shop windows without the automatic scan for things she might want. past advertisements without, absorbing their message that she was insufficient as she was, past people without comparing herself to them, just walking, being present, appreciating the ordinary miracle of a healthy body moving through space on a mild evening. At home, she made tea, sat in her favorite chair by the window, looked around her apartment, the apartment that had once seemed too small, that she'd planned to leave as soon as she could afford something bigger. It was enough. The space was enough. The possessions were enough. The life was enough. Not perfect, not everything she could imagine, but sufficient, adequate, enough. And in that recognition, in that allowing, in that choosing of sufficiency instead of constantly seeking more, there was peace. The peace she'd been seeking through achievement, through accumulation, through constant striving. It had been here all along, not in getting more, but in wanting less, in recognizing what she had as enough. She sipped her tea, watched the light fade from the sky, felt profoundly grateful for enough, for sufficiency, for the quiet rebellion of recognizing that what she had, what she was already complete, enough. What if you already have enough? What if the feeling of insufficiency isn't about what you actually have, but about the constant message that you should want more? What if satisfaction doesn't come from the next achievement, the next possession, the next milestone, but from recognizing what you already have as sufficient? This isn't about settling, isn't about giving up on dreams or goals or growth. It's about asking, are you happy now? Or is happiness always in the future, always dependent on getting more? Because if it's always in the future, you never actually arrive. You spend your whole life reaching, never resting, never satisfied. What if enough is a choice? What if you could choose right now to recognize what you have as sufficient? Not perfect, not everything you could imagine, but enough. Enough space, enough resources, enough time, enough love, enough life. What would change if you stopped reaching? If you allowed yourself to rest in sufficiency? You don't have to answer tonight. Just let the question settle. Let it rest alongside you as you drift toward sleep. Tomorrow you can choose, reaching or resting, more or enough, constant hunger or quiet satisfaction. But tonight, just for tonight, let yourself rest in enough. This breath is enough. This moment is enough. This life, exactly as it is enough. Rest in that. Let it hold you. Let it bring peace. You are enough. You have enough. It is enough.